Probably the simplest part of that to answer is that I work right now as the general manager at VizTech Structural Engineers. Had a quite a varied background. I worked in a fine linen department at Harrods for a while, and I played in a band, as you know. The all that has given me probably like a really varied perspective on a lot of things, which as much as, going to uni and everything's great, I really now reflect on some of those other experiences too. And, when you're younger, you're thinking, where am I going with my life? And I wish I could have told myself then that, don't worry, it'll all come in handy when you get a bit older. But now, probably to talk a bit more about what VizTech does, the key to this conversation is that we've been in mass timber for 10 years now. And I'll be quite proud to say that we were really there when it started here in Australia. I remember reaching out to Rob and Jack, who was running XLAM, picked up the phone and was like, I want to learn more about your stuff. And he went, I'm in Melbourne right now, because they were based in New Zealand. And 10 minutes later, I was down having a coffee with him. And then 2 weeks later, Nathan Bembo and myself were on a plane to New Zealand, and that just kicked that all off. And sort of ever since then, the rest is history a bit in that space. I think that I don't want to, we're not a mass timber engineering firm, and in a little way, even structural engineering, we do structural engineering, but I really have a philosophy that structural engineering can often be seen as you do calculations and you create models and drawings and you put them out there to the world and you do what you do. I look more, and I think structural engineering is really fundamentally about making things happen, moving things from A to B, and all that other stuff is like the tools that we use, and verify compliance for legislation and everything. So when I think about our involvement in mass timber, it's really as much about the specifics of that as much as it is about sort of seeing something that, firstly, from a nerdy point of view, it's like just such a wonderful thing to get involved in, but also to look and go, it could drive so much good, for want of a better word, but sustainability, labor shortages, better quality buildings, all these things. And so it's a bit of a vehicle to make things happen too for us. So that would be a bit of a summation, I guess, about the essence of me and us and what we do. So
that's awesome, man. Well, I'm really keen to so you call Rob and Jack. What's the first project? And it's pretty great. It's quite an innovative step forward, because there's no projects going ahead in this product, right? So it's and then how does that happen? Do you suggest it to the architect? And is there tied to that, is there still scope for the engineer to influence the product material option, or is it always the other way around, where it comes from the top down as opposed to the engineer?
Right now, I had a joke with another, I think Nathan Bembo's been a guest on this podcast too. And he was, and it's funny, it's sort of even, this ties back into, what was the first project. And as a segue, I think the first project, it could have been with Emma Mitchell down at Anglesey, or it could have been with Alex Oceanowski and their tiny little granny flat thing. But either one of those was actually, we did that with XLAM, and that was the first project delivered using Australian-made CLT.
Wow.
We got Tyson, another one of the crew. gave us a little plaque, which is great. And we've actually got the cardboard model that Emma Mitchell used to kind of do for their first project. So a little milestone. But one of our earlier projects, which is a bit of a leap in the deep end, was 55 South Bank. And that very much that talking about the client and the and suggesting the product. For one, that's a really interesting project because it fundamentally would not have worked if it wasn't for mass timber. So when people talk about having to pay maybe a premium for sustainability, etc., there's a lot of business cases where actually mass timber can create projects purely on the commercial reasons alone and the feasibility. And that was a funny one. I'll get back to that mentioning of Nathan. Like, he did an amazing job driving that project and sort of sticking to that philosophy that we have. And he already had it. We didn't have to teach it to him, but moving things from A to B and just doing what it takes, a bit agnostic of what our specific role is to make that happen. But I said to him once, he probably won't remember, but he was like, "That was amazing." I'm like, you know, one thing harder than doing a project like that is like getting onto a project like that, and, you know, getting a client who's going to be committed to do something as ambitious as something like that. So in a way, that sort of, is it a top-down thing? Very often there are architects who really want to bring it in to what they do, and we're seeing that evolve from probably a quite naive approach to it to now almost like there's a bit of a version 2.0 with mass timber, and even at smaller resi things, we're seeing some people really thinking about how to use it and take advantage of the differences rather than kind of working against the differences to conventional construction. Had a great meeting with an architect, and he was just talking about bringing out like a lot of the finishes, just the skirting and stuff like that, and not worrying about that, and detailing things to really accentuate a much more simple, organic aesthetic. And we're like, oh, wow, that's, you know, it's going to look great. But likewise, he went, I'm just taking out a heap of trades. I'm letting the timber do that aesthetic work, and I'm getting to a really cost neutral thing with conventional building. If I really start integrating, I guess, the aesthetic side with the overlay of the cost and leveraging up what mass timber can do. So on one hand, it's really great to see that sophisticated approach to and not seeing it as a product or material substitution, but seeing it as a holistic, different approach to applying it and leveraging it. On the other hand, too, we're kind of developing a thing where we can go a bit bottom up, and for people, I hate using a system because people suddenly think that it's fully resolved, but offering more of a framework where things are put together a bit more so that there's not like a heap of hurdles. They're all, like, every project's unique, and you need to leave a bit of flexibility, but you know, they can come and there's a bit more of a resolved typology that's really going to suit their project or the business case again. And in a way, it sounds a bit innovative, but that's inherently what's happening in conventional construction already. People can just look at it and go, yeah, that's going to be a, you know, post-tension slab, and I'm going to do this and this and this. And there's all this inherent experience and everything that's been built up over the last 50 years. And so that thinking of going a bit bottom up is more just to address that inherent knowledge gap in the market at the moment. and then ultimately, I guess, give clients and people, the decision makers at the top of, I guess, the guiding projects, more confidence. So they're not sort of starting off a project and going through stuff and just seeing a lot of grey areas. We won't solve all of them, but if we can bring those grey areas down a lot, it just it's less intimidating, I guess, making that step into mass timber.
Gotcha. So it's sort of like, yeah, I see what you go in there. It's like concrete, like post tension. You look at it, it's a banded system, XYZ. Maybe it's like for the mass timber, it's like that, but the constraints of what the option is like DFMA, but you're doing that from the bottom up is, I guess, what you're saying as well. Like you're starting with, I guess from the bottom up, it can kind of start with manufacturing throughput. Like what's the shift achieve
Yeah.
through to what's the design look like to achieve that shift through to transport constraints. And then all of a sudden it's like, what is that grid look like? Is that directionally what you're thinking?
Like on outside of our sort of realm, and just to highlight that inherent knowledge that everyone sort of has in conventional, and they don't even realize that they have it. We'll be going through stuff, and an architect is looking at, how do I do my threshold detail to a balcony? How do I do my wet areas? How do I do even my my windows and trims? And sometimes the poor architects are like, oh my God, like I have to do all these little details that I already knew how to do. And my builder probably even knew how to do. I could probably, on a lot of projects, never have even put them in. And the whole supply chain to construction and delivery, everyone knows, you just do but, and that's how you do it. Whereas in mass timber, like as new entrants come into the market, there's just a whole heap of things that they didn't realize was just inherent knowledge that they had, and then everyone up the chain also had it. So, there's certainly those things to address, but then like even back to more global structural arrangements, firstly, it makes a huge difference to be landing somewhere more rational. I have one of my sayings is that, the ship had already sunk before it left the harbour. And mass timber is so much more a cost sensitive. Some very minor things can really swing the dial up and down, or things that look minor, coming from a conventional timber, a conventional construction background. Even as simple, the column beam connection can vary. This is one of the things, like by 9-fold in cost. Whereas with steel and say concrete, you'd never get, like, you could probably detail some things a bit better or a bit worse, but you're never going to be getting that kind of variance in cost. Obviously, things like mass timber is so much more quantized. If you're going from a 5 lamella, say CLT, to a 7 lamella, that pretty much is going to blow feasibility out if that's going to be applied across the whole project. So it's like fine for a grid spacing, and then you go that little bit further, and all of a sudden, bang, concrete. You can just vary it quite linearly, and it doesn't quite have those tipping points through the project that do those big jumps there. Now, the other thing is that, there is a bit of difference across suppliers too. Using concrete again, generally the cost sensitivities are pretty much the same wherever you're going to source it from. Whereas timber, the obvious one is the different restrictions of logistics if you're going to be doing it locally supplied and overseas supplied, so containerized versus, say, back of truck. But even different suppliers, it turns out they've got cost sensitivity and more or less like around sort of some are really quite linear again about the fibers. There are just about the volume of fiber. Others are a bit more, no, there's sort of fluctuations due to the manufacturing process too. Big one will be, say, block gluing with glue lam. Again, like another quantized things, but people do have slight variations on where they change that block gluing from 1, 2, 3 sort of thing. So that's sort of the inputs that will go into a framework, and certainly then allowing enough flexibility at the start to keep everything quite as open as possible. One, for costs, but two, just for supply chain confidence and robustness. With just comparing overseas and local supply again, sadly, in our world at the moment, there's conflicts and a lot of things going on, and so that can introduce that confidence issue for a supplier if they felt like they were only committing to like one sort of area of supply. So frameworks that are flexible enough for that, but it's more of it's a process that focuses in on things and helps it. You start in the right place and then you sort of move forward to what's really going to work, taking all these considerations.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's like, it sounds like without a framework, I don't know, maybe you can elaborate more on what what you're looking at there. But
Yeah.
it seems like if someone's just starting out, such almost an administrative burden, or do you think people that are just starting out have relationships with the supply chain? Because as you said, what are the beam column connections? You move this by X mil, not knowing that your transport limitations or shipping container widths, and you're doing 3 panels in this grid instead of 2 because of this, 5 layers to 7, and like there's all these and it seems like the cost curves, if you nail it, pardon the pun, like you said at the start, there's a project that you've been part of where it's cost neutral, and it's like you're a 9-to-1 difference on connections, like right there is like good luck if you're on the wrong end of that. Like good luck getting your costs back right. But it threw a lot at you, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that's kind of funny is I'm aware I almost have to cut myself off when I first meet a client if they're quite new to everything, because that for one, like the supply chain, there's a lot of variability. There's a lot to consider, but it can be difficult for them to get, I guess, a complete overview of everyone and what they're doing in Australia at the moment and the options they have at hand. And then I'll start going through getting into some of these details and how, not sadly, but it's a very dynamic thing. Like that can actually be better for you, or it might be worse. And after about 40 minutes, when I hadn't drawn a breath, I sort of look and I can see them, they're like, oh my God, like they've sort of been going down a roller coaster. And so I forget, we have been doing this for 10 years. We've got really strong networks into the supply chain too, and a lot of visibility. That all this becomes inherent to myself and the rest of the team, but it's a lot for someone relatively new to take on in one kind of hit. Maybe I should go, we'll have 3 meetings, we'll have Back to the Future 1, Back to the Future 2, and you can, we'll spread it out a little bit. But that's probably, that's the idea of that framework thing too, is to just embed a lot of that knowledge into a process so that it doesn't have to be so manually kind of transferred across into a project.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like IP and in the sense that it's always that balance of like, the innovators like yourselves, and there's a bunch of others, they go forward, get your own standard details, processes, things like that. But at the same time, it's like the standardization and consolidation of everything into industry norms, so to speak. You know, there's like that balance. Maybe one gets swallowed up by the other. What are your thoughts on that in general?
Yeah, and I reflect on this quite a bit. I might, I'll not that I wasn't already jumping around on sort of examples and everything, but I'll jump around a little bit.
Mm.
And sorry, I think I'm going to be using your former. Did you ever work at WSP?
Yes, I
No.
did. I did. Yes.
Yeah, very big global company. They do amazing things. They have a lot of lovely people working there. But one of the things I kind of don't like is protecting IP too much, particularly in structural engineering. Totally understand like an innovative product that really does fall under what you'd expect someone who takes out a patent, and I love the philosophy behind it, that people can really commit and develop up something that they'll get a good reward on, and should be encouraged. In structural engineering, so much of it is just common understanding of materials and things like that. And one of the first things, but it's not quite a mass timber thing, but there was amazing work done on speed core, I think it's called, which is it's over in the States, that hybrid, and they sort of fabricate massive cores out of steel plate and then fill it as it goes up. But the advantage is that it can kind of carry those construction loads, and so they just go up and it goes fast. And I believe it might be like a non-for-profit organization, and I can't remember, but one of the really amazing US engineers over there developed it all up. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think WSP made enough of a significant change to what had been happening. They've now patented it, which just really restricts it. And then you're left in the hands of lawyers. And so there's a lot of uncertainty about, even if you do something and like, are we infringing on that patent? Does a smaller player have anywhere near the resources to, test that and sort of run with it? I then go back to just us and what we do, and I go, if we're going to rely on, I call it active IP protection, it's almost like you're in a different business, and you're going to be running around taking care of that. One of my things I tell anyone who starts with us is we all have the same codes, we all have the same software, we've all got the same resources, we all have to work to legislative requirements and everything. There's not much delta there. It's like, but we've got a telephone, it's the service, it's the experience and the collaboration, it's the approach and attitude. That's what we can do differently as engineers. So very much my thing is don't assume that you're going to come up with this whiz-bang connection detail, and that's going to be your, pin your strategy on that. I will also go though, there's projects are always different and everything. So simply, there's always still room just for technical innovation, and it might not be in the main grid of a post and beam, but there'll be other areas where technical innovation can be applied anyway. So that is something that can be special, but ultimately, it is like, what's the thing that you can do differently that that people aren't really focusing on? And I do go, I will go, firstly, I'll caveat, like sometimes we don't quite get that as good as I wish we could. But I really always looking at it. And I think you could talk to a lot of people we've worked with before, and they would go, yeah, there's quite a difference. Like that, there's really helped us move through things. I just know things like those, like RFI processes and things like that. And it's like, with mass timber, a lot of contractors underestimated how long and complex things can get when you get to a shop modeling period. And all of a sudden, they're really over a barrel. And yeah, that's been one of the good things that we've done, is like going, okay, look, all right, maybe we don't do it quite the same way, because you're never going to be able to hit the deadline if you do this. So sort of putting up the hand and going, let's flatten the communication way that we're doing these things and just keep moving this forward. Obviously, we can't reduce the attention that we're giving to the compliance side of it, but we can sort of work in this bit over here and just move it forward. So where I stand with all that, and I go, good luck to anyone who wants to really leave off essentially just applying as a still go. It's all Timoshenko and all these. They all worked it out. The Romans did the Pantheon Dome. Like, this stuff is really public knowledge, and I'd argue against the ability to make the significant step with a lot of this stuff that a patent would require. But
it's almost like I feel like sometimes things that are too smart is like a red flag rather than a green flag. It's like people go in circles and circles. And as you said, like a simple seated bearing connection, like they're probably a beam column connection, just seating the beam on the column and etching. It's like, that's probably what a 10-year-old would come up with if you said, oh, how would you do this? They go, oh, why can't we just cut this out? And you know what I mean? It's like, and I think the thing that you've developed over 10 years is relationships in the industry. It's like you've got, and there's no need for IP protection. It's just like being a good person and actively engaging in the industry. And then that's the thing that makes the projects move ahead, or also like psychological. I could imagine, like, if someone does know what they're doing, speaking to someone at the start, they just need certainty that, like, oh, can this person, do I have confidence that this person can take it, go ahead? And that's not like a technical solution. It's like a good feeling you give them, that,
yeah,
and confidence, right?
yeah. I will do one of my really bad jokes. I don't have kids, but if I did, that would be a dad joke. And that is, it's not just engineering, it's enjoy-nearing. So,
That is a dad joke. That is an absolute dad joke if I've ever heard it. Like,
about bringing love. But one other thing you sort of raise, and it's can be a bit of a general issue with engineers, because they're all really smart, and but sometimes they can resolve things and sort of end up with a solution looking for a problem. And then once things are protected and quantized, you lose flexibility. You start trying to, we'll change the project to kind of suit what we're going to apply. And like, I refer to it as the MacGyver approach. And it's the limitations of things can actually drive the innovation. So, build a helicopter out of the stuff you've got under your kitchen sink kind of thing. And that is, I think, particularly applicable to mass timber again, where the supply chain isn't as broad and available, just locally. So confidence in the supply chain is a really important part of the development of a project. And then as soon as you sort of start locking up things and losing flexibility because of IP things, you might be limiting, I guess, a client's ability to risk manage and be able to pivot should other things kind of pop up. So it's sort of be like the reed in the wind a bit more than something sort of brittle and rigid, and those things can introduce that brittleness to the overall sort of approach to a project.
Totally. You've been working on some of the biggest and best projects in Australia. Is there any news on a recent update on some of the wins that you've had, and on the back of that, like, any things that are front of mind? You mentioned, like, Mass Timber 2.0. That's probably a good podcast episode for this one, actually. But like,
Yeah.
what goes into that bucket based on the most recent projects? And feel free to plug some of them because they are quite incredible. Some of the ones you're a part of, if you're allowed to publicly say it, of course.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you said that though, because I was going, oh, I don't want to talk about the projects. The I'll go actually to probably what you weren't expecting, and it's not a specific thing, but we do a lot of stuff in residential, and it's great, and it's with the new, is it 7-star, like the energy requirements and everything, it actually really opens up to what mass timber can do again, and integrating it. Put it this way, like we're sort of seeing things, and yeah, that cost parity is fast approaching because
In
you kind of,
Resi, hey? I thought Resi would be the last to get to cross parity. So that's really surprising and exciting.
yeah. We're doing a tiny project which happens to be a kitchen add-on for my mum and dad, and it's tiny, and it never, even I didn't look at it. Dad being involved, he's owner founder of the business, and he's like, let's do mass timber, because as an example, and it'll be great. And I was like, just wait till we cost it, and then you might change your mind. Well, it all ends up not being that bad, and it's certainly a typology that doesn't look to immediately lend itself to mass timber. Secondly, though, like we're going with like a vaulted ceiling and doing some things which it just comes so easily to mass timber. And if you're going to do those things out of conventional, it'll start to get really expensive really quickly. And then the other thing too, and I've got my fingers crossed here, is it needs to be booked before Christmas, and we haven't even started on site. And they think that we're going to be in by the middle of December, and that's just nuts. And I actually said to the builder, there's one thing you've got to be really careful of. None of your contractors are going to believe you. And you'll have these guys lined up and you'll call them and they'll be like, what are you talking about? He did that. And he went, that's exactly, like, I'm glad you told me, because one of them drove past and they saw there was nothing happening on site. We're getting close to Christmas. And so he rang him and he was like, hey, what are you talking about? He's like, I just drove past, nothing's happened. And he sort of took him through it. And that guy went, thank God you called me. Because in the back of my head, I was like, I'm not going to hear from them, sort of thing. So, there's that too. And I don't like, or at least on larger projects, there's a lot of talk about speed of construction. And I'm a believer that until we really start to have proven that, but on an ongoing basis, I wouldn't recommend it to a client to, factor in big savings in that area. But certainly at a resi level, if you're talking about people having Christmas, with their family or whatever you do, but if you, rural areas and everything, and people are sort of going, it's going to be like 2 years before this gets built. And again, on the personal side, these are the holiday houses, and these are like places where people can have wonderful experiences. And the idea that you can kind of bring that conflated, it's like, all right, don't worry about the dollars, but how good is it that you can just get in there and start using it really quickly? And I mean, it does equally go for urban things too. But a lot of that with the resi stuff it's around the how the insulation has to be done now, and across the board, like everything conventional's got really expensive really quickly. So the some of the legislation stuff helps the mass timber side, but certainly conventional's really come up just on its own side of the scale to bring everything into balance a bit more. So
yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I didn't that, and like going back to 55 South Bank, it's like there's like nuances on every project getting in before Christmas, schools, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's so much in that. And as we're getting to the end of the potty, Robbie, it's been amazing chatting to you. what do you see as the future of our industry and the future of timber construction? And if there's any things on the bleeding edge that you see coming that are good, or any things that we can improve?
I'll jump to a specific thing. We've got some North American partners, and we've sort of looked at this. And funnily enough, the Resi helps with this too, because it's post and plate. It's certainly, again, it's limited. The grids to mean that it's not a wide span sort of approach to things, but it's got a lot of applications. Really does harness certainly CLT plate, and it leans on that two-way direction spanning, which is just like an untapped little thing there. Obviously, glue lam or steel option, it's really straightforward. So it's a really nice step for maybe a second tier contractor who doesn't have the resources and everything to manage a complex digital landscape supply chain. Flat soffits, so mechanical services and everything don't even have to worry about it. But like our North American partners are talking about really close to cost parity with concrete. I think that we have a different sort of commercial environment which would take it to parity if it was applied here in the same way. And I mean, then as a structural system, if you're talking about housing affordability and some of these things, there's like this gap that it's like, holy moly, like this really could be fulfilling the sort of the needs in the community and so forth. And I'm a big one, like if we want mass timber to be used more, we've got to find some areas where it's just a commercial decision. And it's great. Universities have been doing a lot of construction in schools and in government, but they're very different assets. The owners have very different requirements and outcomes. But to make that at scale change, decarbonisation, the private developers and clients need a couple of at least first avenues so that it can sort of prove itself in the market. So that's like it's something that we're really excited about, and it's good to go. It's like it's there. It doesn't need further, this or that or refinement. Just MacGyver again. We need to just put all the pieces together. Certainly think about speed of construction with that, but then all the ongoing speed of construction, facades, get it weather tight fast. So I could go on for ages, but in general, I think, I don't know what the future holds, but I think that the next step is to hone in on some of these business cases that just work commercially and really start to get that crossover into private projects. And then sort of a foothold as a mainstream approach to construction, and remove that feeling that it's a bespoke thing. And then, that huge thing about decarbonisation, I call it the bacon effect, is that, you don't like eating Brussels sprouts, but add bacon to that or anything and it tastes better. And there's a great Portlandia episode that hits on that. But that sort of thing is, it's just coming in and people are just doing it for this reason, and then they're finding out like, oh, by the way, it's really highly sustainable, and it's an important step from a more altruistic, society-minded approach to be taking. That's what I would be going as one of the big themes that really needs to happen. How exactly you do that, you get down in, that's another podcast, Adam.
That's so good. Well, Robbie, it's been amazing to chat to you. It was a long time coming to have you on the podcast, actually, in hindsight. But if people want to find out more about yourself and VizTech, where should they go?
You go to the website. We kind of have to update it at the moment, and I do that a lot myself. So, so www.visjet.com.au. I highly recommend if anyone wants to come by our office, and you'll know how lovely it is. Come by. We've got like some samples and things too, but it's a really
You
great
got an
way.
amazing connection sample. One of your connection sample things you got in there is amazing. It's so good.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
do
yeah.
have you got some of the best sampling I reckon I've seen as like a sample setup. It's awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, highly recommend that. And then I guess that, go to the website, look us up, and we can sort of start any conversations anyone wants to have.